right, everyone. Very welcome to the Ravit Show. I am super excited today to welcome Sudeep George, the Vice President of Engineering at iMerit. Today, we will be discussing about Sudeep's journey, edge cases, AI, and much more. We've already had Radha Basu, CEO of iMerit, on the Ravit Show earlier this year. We discussed a lot about edge cases, AI, but can't wait to obviously discuss and get more into the weeds with Sudeep George since he comes from that engineering background. And it would be, obviously super interesting to take questions around the engineering and get that overview from Sudeep. Also, feel free to have your questions coming in. I know for a fact edge cases have been there since a while and we would want to learn more about it. So feel free to have your questions coming in. Also, a little about our guest today. Sudeep George is the Vice President of Engineering at iMerit, as I mentioned, where he develops production-ready frameworks for a data-centric approach to machine learning. He has a strong background in the imaging, sensors, computer vision, and has built and manufactured multi-sensor computational imaging platforms for several market verticals. So obviously there's a lot that we would want to learn from him today, and have your questions coming in. As I mentioned, also very cool giveaway that we're doing today is about one annual subscription of 365 data science. So don't forget to type in hashtag 365 data science in the chat and we will pick the winners. And also, if you wish to ask questions to Sudeep, don't hesitate to put in a hashtag and ask that question. I'm sure Sudeep would love to take on those questions once we go live. Also, let's not make our guest wait anymore. Hey, Sudeep, welcome to the Ravit Show. How are you?
Good. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me on the show. Really excited to be here.
amazing. Sudeep, equally excited to learn more about edge cases, AI, and obviously, I was just telling our audience that you've done so much in this space. So can't wait to learn more about. And obviously, when you're coming from an engineering background today, I know for a fact it's such a hot, career out there, and people want to learn so much. But I'm sure we'll be getting into the weeds of it, and we'll be learning a lot. But why not start with your introduction, Sudeep?
Sure thing. So, hi, everybody. My name is Sudeep George. I'm the VP of Engineering at iMerit. I come from a computer vision and embedded systems background. I've been building computational imaging products for the last 15 odd years, and I co founded my previous startup in the same space. I've seen computer vision grow from a very niche, complex, and complicated technology space to an ubiquitous and even more complex space that it is today. At iMerit, I'm building products and systems that help enable and accelerate the AI production and deployment process.
Wow, this is quite detailed, I'm sure, in you building up great things at iMerit. So can't wait to obviously learn about those as well and learn about edge cases. So just for our audience, don't who are joining us now, don't forget to ask questions to Sudeep and put a hashtag or put a tag to Sudeep, and he'll be happy to answer those questions as well. Um, since we are on this topic, obviously we would also love to know, and I'm sure the audience are kind of curious about iMerit and what the company does. So can you tell us more about it, Sudeep?
So at iMerit, we provide data intelligence for production AI. We do this by working with our customers and helping them structure and classify their data that is used to train
Mm-hmm.
ML models. We also provide actionable insights that are used for test case generation, anomaly testing, and edge case management. Now, iMerit is based or rather headquartered in the US, got a bunch of offices across the world. We work with a broad spectrum of AI companies across various domains. You had Radha, our founder and CEO, on your show
Exactly.
a couple of months back. So I've got some big boots to fill in. And
Mm-hmm.
with Radha leading our team, we've got close to around 5,500 team members.
Wow.
We have the Khosla Impact, Omidyar Network, as well as the Dell Foundation as some of our investors. And more
Nice.
importantly, at iMerit, we are extremely focused on providing high quality training data to our customers. We have a tech accelerated workforce, a tech propelled workforce who use technology to deliver a lot of this intelligence back to our customers. We have various teams who are subject matter experts in different domains of AI. And more importantly, from a company perspective, we are an enterprise grade company. We provide enterprise grade features. So we work with some big customers across various domains.
Okay, this is amazing, and I'm sure 5,500 is like super huge. And I know for a fact where when even Radha was on the show and now you on the show, you guys are always hiring, and iMerit is always there wanting to help the new talent to come out there and obviously join the workforce in the great join the great mission that you guys are on. So are we still hiring, or how does that work?
We're very much hiring. And thank you for asking this question. It's very close to my heart. We're building great
Amazing.
teams at iMerit, and we work with a multitude of domains. We obviously work with customers who are operating the cutting edge of AI, and we have to provide them products and services in that space. So we have data engineering and data scientists. We also use a lot of ML to
Hmm.
train ML models. So we need ML scientists in computer vision, NLP, audio, multiple such domains. We also build our own web-based tools. So we have a lot of development that happens in the full stack, database, front end, back end technology areas, and the bunch of roles and positions open. I would really recommend that anyone interested have a look at our careers page and get all the required details.
Amazing. And just to thanks for that information, Sudeep. I'll just for our audience who are joining us and are interested to join iMerit, I would love to bring this up for them. What you guys just need to do is go to imerit.net slash careers, and it looks amazing, the open positions that you have like with the workforce. And it's not only just in India, but it's all over the world that I can see. So which is, and there are like so many departments to iMerit, so that's amazing. I'm sure there are many folks who would be interested in such positions, so feel free to obviously check out the imerit.net slash careers page, and you can learn more about the hirings. So thanks for that, Sudeep. Also, I was since when we started, obviously I was talking a lot around data engineering and how this space is getting like super hot. So obviously have this curious question, since you are from engineering background, how fast is this space evolving, and where do you see it going in the next 2 to 3 years?
Um, Very interesting question. In a nutshell, the evolution is at breakneck speed, multiple areas of activities. But I think if I would like to expand it a bit further, I think there are
Hmm.
two main areas where there's a lot of evolution that's happening. One is in
Yep.
the technology space. Obviously, every day there's a new announcement coming out in the ML and the AI domains. Recently, for example, there was DALI that was announced by OpenAI.
Right.
But apart from just coming out with newer techniques, there's also a refinement and enhancement and optimization of existing methods and processes, all of which are fundamentally changing the landscape.
Hmm.
So that's one very strong area of evolution. And the second part is all about the maturity of this ecosystem now.
True.
So traditionally, AI has always been this black box where people didn't know what's happening under the hood. For a
Hmm.
long time, it was more art than science. But today, that has evolved because you have processes that help you build robust and reliable systems, processes
Right.
like ML ops, ML data ops. There's observable AI, there's explainable AI, all of which provide a lot of tools and insights that help you understand what's happening behind the scenes. So,
Hmm.
a lot of innovation, a lot of accelerated growth in this space. So, very interesting place to be in.
Okay, that's fantastic. Also, with you know, also the data engineering role is kind of playing a very important role in this space today. So, how do you see it? Like what has changed in last 2 to 3 years? I don't want to go back like 5 years or 10 years, but in just last 2 to 3 years, what do you think has kind of changed? And now people are kind of more focused towards, or more, they kind of feel more to get into something which is data engineering role. Because obviously you coming from a background where you've seen so many things, I'm sure, evolving. But what about the last 2 3 years?
So, I think the space is fundamentally changing. There are a lot
Mm,
of companies who are building products and services in a wide spectrum of domains. You really wouldn't believe, the kind of problem statements that many of these companies are solving with the help of ML and AI. So, with that background, the data engineering space by itself has seen accelerated growth. I foresee that this is going to continue for quite a long time. And this is because there's a ton of problem statements that need to be solved, and we're just getting started. And
right.
if I could just take a step back, I feel that there are obviously multiple elements that have contributed to this, but one very important fact is that today computing and connectivity have become so widespread, so efficient, that it's very easy to have real-time data collection and real-time data processing. And at the heart of data engineering, we are trying to model a real world situation and build a solution for it. But the reality is that the model that we are building has to continuously evolve with the dynamic changes that happen in the real world.
Right.
And because you have a real time capability, that is a problem statement that we can start solving in a very efficient way. So all said and done, I think there is the the infrastructure which has grown up, but apart from just the plain infrastructure, uh, do you want to do this again? I didn't know if there was some background sound.
No worries, we can do this again.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry about that. Okay, so do you want to just go to the question again? Again,
Yeah.
my cues problem.
No worries, no worries at all, Sudeep. Let's do this.
Did you hear that, by the way? There was a vehicle behind which.
No worries. No, I maybe there's a sound cancellation, so no worries. We can take the
Oh,
question
okay,
again.
okay. I'll
Yep.
keep that in mind.
Okay, no worries. So Sudeep, I know for a fact where you come from a background which is into data engineering, and you've seen the space evolving. So obviously, would want to learn more about how do you see data engineering role, and how has it changed in the last 2 to 3 years? And I wouldn't want to go back to 5 or 10 years, but in just last 2 to 3 years, what are your thoughts? What are you seeing? Just want to get your thoughts there.
Well, this space is accelerating very rapidly because there are a lot of problem statements that are being solved with AI and ML today, right? So that itself is pulling a lot of people, a lot of companies into this space. Obviously, the techniques and the platforms have become sophisticated enough that we can build robust production grade solutions. And a lot of these factors have contributed to the growth of data engineering. I personally see the space growing for quite a few years. And I
Yeah.
think there's going to be a lot of evolution, a lot of changes, and nothing's dynamic in this field. But when
Mm,
I look back on, why are we here? I think there are a couple of interesting aspects that have contributed to this current situation. One is the
right.
fact that computing and connectivity are now so widespread, efficient, that real-time data collection and real-time data processing is now a viable reality. And that is
Mm,
important because at the heart of data engineering, we're trying to model a real world. The real world dynamically changes. We are now in a position where we can match those changes and build
mm,
systems at a pretty fast speed. So that is one important aspect. The second aspect, I think, is the growth in the engineering ecosystems and processes. Uh,
mm,
the I mean, roughly at least 80% of the work that is put in to build an AI system is all about engineering. The ML model training, model tuning, all of that stuff is
mm,
probably only 20%. And like I mentioned earlier, this is where we're seeing robust practices around ML data ops, ML ops coming
nice.
in and enabling production grade solutions to be created. And with all of these factors, this space is growing. It's going to grow for quite some time.
Okay, this is fantastic. Thanks for that. Obviously, that's one of the reasons why I had this question, because experience speaks for itself. You've seen the space very closely, and now, obviously, in last 3 years, you've seen it evolving so much. So these are great insights. Definitely, it will bring a lot of value to our audience joining us. Also, Sudeep, that I know for a fact you kind of touched on where AI is kind of now real. People kind of want to learn more about it, and I have a question around it, and obviously it's the question of the hour, which is what are edge cases and how do they impact AI deployment?
Sure. Good question. I think edge cases are what I call as the showstoppers of AI today, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to give you the a very concise definition, an edge case is a rare or unique event in the data that an AI system is processing. It could also be a combination of normal events that have come together at a single instance of time to create a very complex scenario. Now, what is the impact of edge cases? Typically, an edge case is a situation that an AI system has not been trained to handle. So when an
Mm-hmm.
AI system encounters these situations, it tends to either ignore the situation or
Yeah.
take the wrong action, right? Both of which can have a lot of impact. The impact could be in the safety, security space. It could be liability. It could be financial. A lot of these ripple effects kick in. So edge cases slowly become very critical as soon as you get into production, because that is when most of these ML systems are encountering these untrained scenarios. I
Right.
always give this example where to help describe this better. So if you compare a human driver versus a self-driving car AI system, and if there was an object on the road, the human driver would look at that object and first think about the safety aspect. Is it safe to drive by it? Can I bypass it? Thoughts around those lines. But an AI system would look at that same object, and the first line in its algorithm will be, have I been trained to understand that particular data point? If I have not,
Wow.
I don't know what to do. So let me fall on some default action, which may or may not be appropriate for that situation.
Hmm. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And obviously, when you've kind of differentiated it very well in terms of how it works and how it might be inappropriate to be in a use case. So that's very interesting. Also, do you have like some examples of edge cases? You know, iMerit that you guys have handled, or
Sure.
something that you can showcase to our audience. I know for a fact we've had like a few slides as well, so we can bring that up for our
Sure,
audience
sure.
to.
Please do
Yeah.
that. But I'd like to remind
Yep.
everyone that these are just examples. We
Yep.
cannot and do not, bring out our customer data for obvious
Yeah.
reasons. We take data security and integrity very seriously at iMerit. But I've put together a couple of examples that illustrate some of the real world problems that we have had to solve. So if you could just
Yeah.
play the
I
slides.
I can do that very quickly here.
If could you go to the previous one, please?
Sure.
Okay. So this is an example of an AV system that's trained to detect stop signs. So an AV system is supposed to detect, recognize, and take an appropriate action when it encounters a stop sign. The model is well trained. It has real world stop signs like the one you see right now, well tested. But as soon as it's deployed, as you can see in the next slide, it, the AI system essentially encounters stop signs that are either covered with snow or graffiti, may be blocked by trees and branches, right? But please remember that in spite of all of this, the AI system has to still accurately determine that it is a stop sign and reliably take the appropriate action. I'm stressing on accurately and reliably because
Hmm.
this is what differentiates a production AI system from an R&D system.
Yeah. I think this is very useful for our
Yeah,
audience, because they kind of get an understanding what you're talking about in terms of and how AI needs to be that powerful that, okay, even if there's a tree covering it or a snow covering it, how do you want to understand what's on the sign plate? So that's very
Yeah,
helpful,
if you could
Sudeep.
just, yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. And if you could actually just go to,
Yep.
I've got some more examples. If that's of interest,
Nice.
I can push that
Oh
across.
yes, I would love to hear. I love these
Okay,
examples, Sudeep, to be honest, and I'm sure the audience would be equally interested. So don't hesitate. Feel free to show us whatever you have in the store.
sure thing. So this
Yeah.
is actually a real world incident that was reported I would say, a
Oh,
couple of years back now, where the owner of a self-driving vehicle, I'm not going to name the manufacturer,
yeah.
but this vehicle owner reported that their vehicle would always stop when they passed this building.
Oh,
So a lot of analysis was done. Finally, it was understood that the logos around this building look very similar to stop signs.
stop sign.
This was confusing the AI system. Now, one may ignore the saying that this is a one-off issue, very random, doesn't really make too much of impact. But there are 95 such stores in just 5 states across the US. So
Oh,
now the problem statement has exponentially expanded, right? There's
mm,
chaos that is a potential situation in all of these scenarios. So this is an example of an edge case. And again, I'm taking stop signs because it's kind of traditional now to talk about
exactly.
stop signs when discussing edge cases in the AV world. Again, you have stop signs which are covered with lights, which will have other signages on it. The AI system
Mm,
has to rapidly process all of this and take accurate and reliable actions.
yeah.
Another very interesting example from the AV world again is this urban landscape where a self-driving car has to reliably distinguish between a person and their reflection on the window panes. So this is a very common scenario in urban landscapes and very hard for an AI system to distinguish that. And that's where a lot of expert annotation comes in play to enable you to solve such cases.
Yeah.
This is another example where there's a signage on the car, and imagine that you were driving behind this car, and the AI system, or rather the AI, a self-driving car was behind the system. The AI module would have to interpret this particular scene, understand that these cyclists can be safely ignored, and take the appropriate action. All of this has to happen in fractions of seconds, right? So
Oh my, yeah.
you have to make sure that the decision and the action are all done in a very reliable, accurate manner within milliseconds. So these are some of the challenges that many of these self-driving car companies face. Another example, you have this sticker of a car on a bus,
Hmm.
right? What is the AI system supposed to do here? Right? It could be driving around, it sees this. Does it stop in the middle of the road and potentially cause an accident, or does it kind of ignore it? These are all scenarios that need to be evaluated, and the AI system has to be trained for.
Mm,
I've been talking a lot about AV use cases, but obviously edge cases are in every domain of the AI spectrum. I've taken this example from medical imaging, where the AI system is trying to distinguish between tumor cells and stromal cells. So
hmm.
fundamentally, both these kind of cells are seen on this image. Very hard to distinguish because the differences are minute. In fact, this is where we bring in medical experts to help us in training and classifying the data. So there's a need for a lot of subject matter expertise in this space. It's not that anybody could just go about creating training data. You need subject matter experts, you need domain experts here.
Got it.
Okay. Yeah, so these
Mm,
were some of the examples I wanted to show the audience, Ravit. I think it's a very significant problem. I've
yeah.
obviously just touched on a couple of situations. There's a huge variety of similar problems that exist in the legal space, in the fintech space, with similar implications.
Yeah, exactly. I can only imagine, with obviously the the one example which was like the real life case example that you mentioned was about a a, a place where obviously his or her car kind of stops every time is just because of the signage of stop kind of is kind of almost the same of that with the brake one. So it's very interesting, and there are so many minute details that you might have want to obviously have a look at before getting into the case. So these are very interesting. And also, very quick question here. So I know for a fact, you showed me a sticker on a bus. Uh, I know for a fact where, advertisements will evolve over time. It will have like various variations out there. Like, uh, in next say 3 years, this would have been a completely different scenario. And how do you guys adopt that? Just wanting to learn a little about that. So do you have like, obviously, the data coming in, you guys get, like, you have a team which kind of researches on all of these things and kind of brings back that, okay, these are the cases we want to study, and then obviously want to also implement for customers who might come in? How does that work, Sudeep?
So very complex issue, obviously, because at
Yeah.
the heart of this entire conversation that we're having now on edge cases is the fact that the real world dynamically changes. You cannot control it, right? You cannot
True.
build a model of the real world and say that that is how reality is going to be for the next 2 years. So that
Exactly.
is why there's this whole continuous training paradigm that's coming in play when building AI systems. Um, for the technical folks in your audience, in the software world, there is CI/CD, which is about continuous integration, continuous deployment. So that's a
Yeah.
proven methodology. In the AI space, it's about continuous training. Once a model is released, you're immediately evaluating its performance. And for lack of a better term, a model depreciates the moment it's released into deployment, right? Because something
Yeah.
has started to change, and so you're always monitoring the performance. And once you see things go below a certain threshold, you go back and retrain your models.
Yeah, I love your perspective where you obviously mentioned about models once kind of released, they start to depreciate there and then, because the world kind of starts evolving at the same time. It's
Right.
ever evolving. You can't have that control over, but you can still want to build the best use case out there in best edge cases that you've spoken about. So thank you very much about that, Sudeep. Also, that brings me to something which is kind of related and kind of also important. So what are some processes and best practices to ensure consistency in case of edge case annotation that you were just mentioning about? Where do you see it, like, going, and what are your thoughts about it?
So, very important question,
Yeah.
because at the heart of this whole ML training for production and deployment, it is a need for being very process driven. But before I
Hmm.
get into explaining some of the processes and robust mechanisms that are used, it's very
Yeah.
important to understand that there are different definitions for edge cases. So,
Right.
depending on which stage of the ML life cycle you're involved in, an edge case could have different connotation. For example, in data collection, an edge case could be that you have collected incomplete or insufficient data for a certain class. In the
Hmm.
data annotation space, it may be that you did not mark out all the attributes, all the features of a specific data point.
Hmm.
In the model testing space, it could be that you didn't test your models for all the classes, for all the combinations and permutations of those classes. And in the
Correct.
model deployment stage, it's about how the model actually performs in the real world. So now that we understand these various definitions for edge cases, there are individual processes that have been refined for each of these stages. For example, in the data collection or annotation stage, the focus is on guidelines. So remember, again, like I mentioned earlier, ML model is trying to build a replica of a real world situation and then process
Right.
it and take appropriate decisions. That real world scenario has to be modeled very accurately, and you need accurate guidelines which cover the model in its entirety, right? Because
True.
any gaps in those guidelines would result in gaps in either the data that you collect or the gaps in the data that you annotate. So that's one very important aspect. Moving on, there is also a need for a very tight feedback loop between when an edge case is uh, detected and it is the ML model is being trained to handle that particular edge case. This
Mm-hmm.
becomes very important because today's AI systems are incredibly complex, right? So
True.
a lot of data, multiple models, multiple versions of models, right? Very important to make sure that there is a very tight feedback loop to take care of the data and the edge case that is being resolved. And that's where ML ops, ML data ops also play a very significant role. Now, assuming that you've trained your model, you've handled a particular edge case, how do you test for it? It's very important that there is a streamlined process for even testing and validating your model against that particular scenario. And that is
Mm-hmm.
where simulations, synthetic data come into play. And the last is that there is a need for an end-to-end testing that is performed whenever a model is released. Like I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned earlier, there are multiple models that make up modern day AI systems. If I take the example of self-driving car systems, there could be a model for object detection, a model for lane detection, a model for trajectory generation.
Oh my
Now, any
God.
change in object detection will have an effect on the
Okay.
trajectory generation, right? So
Mhm.
making sure that these models are tested in its entirety are extremely important.
Okay, this is very important information that you're sharing, obviously, because how all the models are kind of interconnected to each other, and there's if
True.
even if there's like a minute change out there, obviously there will be, like you mentioned, obviously the trajectory will change for the other model as well, and maybe there'll be a lot of changes that would be happening. So I can only imagine the work that kind of goes behind this, and it's it's kind of difficult to even think about how much you guys are putting in efforts to make sure that this comes out right. And I have a question around that as well. Like, I know for a fact where you work with the world class companies out there, and also when Radha was in the show, she shared a lot around it, but would love to hear from you, how do you align the edge cases with client requirements? Like, it's a very difficult thing. I can only, with all the things that you've mentioned till now, I know for a fact when a client kind of comes in, he or she will have like so many things out there which would be so complicated. So how do you align it with the edge cases?
Sure. A great question because I think that's a very important question when you're building AI systems today, right? And it is very important that you work with the right partners who can help you build your AI systems.
Right.
To get into some of the details, so the first thing that we ensure is that there is high quality data classification that we provide our customers. So, like I mentioned earlier, edge cases are all about the misses or the gaps in the training of an AI system. So if you have wrongly annotated your data, you're going to have bad performance in the field. And that is very important metric. And in fact, that is one of the biggest ways in which we distinguish ourselves from our competitors in the fact that we consistently meet very high quality SLA levels. So you're having high quality data that's being annotated.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, within iMerit, we have uh, domain experts. Like I mentioned earlier, it's very important to understand the domain because the way an image is interpreted is very different in the autonomous vehicle domain versus the medical imaging domain. So you really need to understand the domain, and we have in-house experts who understand the domain. Now, that being said, you also need to understand the data. The term that is used is data modality. So whether it's image data, radar, LiDAR data, or even
Mm-hmm.
audio or textual data, it's very important to understand that data because without understanding the data, you can't structure it, you can't
Exactly.
classify. That is another important area that teams within iMerit focus on. And given that we work with a broad spectrum of AI companies, we've had a lot of experience in helping them build their AI products. We also provide various levels of insights. These
Mm.
data driven insights are what changed the game for many of our customers. I'd like to explain that further with an example.
Yeah.
So, sometime back, we had this customer who came to us, wanted to build a model that could distinguish between a sunny day and a cloudy day for
Mm.
whatever use case that they had. So they collected a lot of data, trained the models, but the real world performance was pretty bad, never meeting the performance thresholds that they had in mind. This went on for quite some time, and that is where teams from iMerit went in and they studied the data and they started using the shadow and the length of the shadow cast by various objects within the scene, cars, people, and other objects. So
Oh my.
the shadows of all of these objects were used as a feature point. And with the introduction of this feature point, the ML model performance, improved drastically, and they were able to actually deploy this. So this is a example of where data insights are very important, right? The
Hmm.
customer is not coming and saying, "Hey, you need to do this." Teams
Exactly.
within iMerit are, figuring out, okay, this may be useful to the customer and providing the information and the insights.
Okay, this is very important information that you've shared, Sudeep, and obviously you've given a sneak peek into how you guys actually get on the field and understand how it takes to, put in back in the model and what kind, what you need to actually consider. And this is just one example. I'm sure there are various different types of use cases that you kind of work for the clients, and obviously that's why you're kind of unique in yourself, and great work that iMerit team is doing. Hats off. So definitely love the, obviously the examples that you've shared here, Sudeep. But also uh, that brings me to more want to learn more about iMerit, and tell us a bit more about iMerit edge case platform. Also, what are the next product advancements that you're looking to make to improve edge case handling, because I know for a fact you have to ramp up, and what's like that next step that you guys are taking?
Sure. So, and I mean, we work with this broad spectrum of AI companies, different
Yep.
domains, and within each domain, like if you take the example of AV space,
Right.
each self-driving car company approaches the same problem statement in very unique ways, right?
Mhm.
So we are working with different approaches within the same domain. We're working with different domains, and we built this whole expertise around edge cases and figuring out all the problem areas within edge case resolution. So the most important aspect of our platform today is the fact that it helps for an edge case to be identified, and typically, the process that is involved, that occurs when an edge case is reported, is that various stakeholders come together, they understand the scenario, they discuss, and finally arrive at a solution. So the edge case platform accelerates this whole process, bringing everyone in, providing real time alerts, digitizing the whole conversation and the solution to that particular problem. And once this is done, the next time somebody else faces this problem, in many cases, we can automatically provide a solution because we've already seen this problem,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So that is, I think, the most important aspect of the edge case platform that we have. And in terms of future growth, some of the areas that we're working on is to actually generate insights that help you prevent edge cases that you're not even aware of. So let me explain
Hmm.
this further. So we have all of this digital data that we have collected. We combine it with process guidelines, with test reports, with actual edge case reports that come from the field. So you get this huge collection of data, which we then clean up. We start
Right.
extracting the metadata. Once you have that metadata collected, we then mine that metadata to create various scenarios, to extract various scenarios that can potentially occur. And once we have these scenarios listed, we then start solving for those scenarios. So that is when we work with our customers in helping them generate synthetic data, or help them generate simulations. We help them with test case generation, with anomaly testing. So that's how we help them solve for edge cases which they have not yet encountered, because we generated insights from the older edge cases from the knowledge bank that we have created. So that's the next evolution for edge case management and for our edge case platform. And that's where a lot of the action is happening today.
Okay, that's fantastic. I'm sure future of iMerit are in great hands of you, your team. You guys have amazing plans out there. So can't wait to see how iMerit is progressing. But also, I have a very interesting questions, and I'm sure all the folks who are attending us today would love to would would definitely like this question coming, and that's something more on the lines like, what are some ways to fix the gaps of edge cases in data sets? So that's like a challenge, right? And we would want to learn more about that as well, Sudeep.
So good question, very pertinent in today's scenario. I think resolving edge cases is where process meets R&D, right? To explain this further, an edge case is basically a gap in training data because of which an AI system doesn't know what to do. So how do you fill those gaps? One, of course, you identify the gaps, but then once you have identified the gap, how do you fill that up? Multiple ways in which that can be handled, but two prominent ways are to take data and augment it in many forms to create additional data points. And with these additional data points, the model is trained better. It's able to evaluate and understand scenarios that it probably wouldn't have seen otherwise. So that's
Mm-hmm.
one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is to artificially generate data. Now, coming back to the first aspect of augmenting data, there are two ways in which, again, that can be done. One is depending on the data domain. So, whether it is image space or if it is audio or text, there are different techniques that can be used to augment this data by, for example, if I take the case of computer vision, you have an image, it is an image of a box. You can run various filters, various transformations to rotate and change the angle of the box in images, to change the lighting and the shadows on the box, to introduce various levels of noise on that box. All of this can be used to train a model so that it can recognize a box in any of those scenarios. So that
Okay.
is one approach. The other approach is to use deep learning to generate additional data. A great
Mm.
use case for this is in face detection. So,
Okay.
most AI systems today that operate in the face detection space typically have problems around ethnicities and around gender. They perform better for a certain gender, for certain ethnicities, and that is because there's bias in the data. And what many of the practitioners are now doing is to take data, run it through deep learning algorithms, generate what
Mm-hmm.
are called as deep fakes, but are actually additional data that is created, artificial faces that are generated. And with the
Mm-hmm.
help of these artificially generated faces, fill in those gaps. So let's say that there was a lesser representation of a certain ethnicity within the data set. You can artificially generate that. And you have very sophisticated systems that do that today to fill in those gaps and to create that data, which enables a model to be trained. So that is about augmenting data. The
Yeah.
other aspect that I touched upon was about artificially creating this data.
Creating.
And that's where we have borrowed very heavily, and I'm using the term borrowed very loosely as
Mm-hmm.
well, from gaming engines, right? So in gaming systems, we create these simulations, these scenarios artificially, they are rendered, and then we use the same technology to render a
Wow.
particular scene and then create various combinations of those scenes. So, for example, let's say that you had an edge case where the road was dark, it is raining, and there is mud on your camera lens, right?
Mm-hmm.
Extremely hard and quite impractical to physically capture this data to train a model, right? But that is where you can bring in simulations and gaming engines to actually help you create this scenario artificially. And the moment the
Right.
scenario is created, you can quickly change it from night to daylight conditions to very heavy
Ah.
rain to light rain. All of those things can be done, programmatically. And that is the beauty of the synthetic data, which is a very growing mode of augmenting data that is used in training AI systems today.
Nice. I think these are fantastic examples, and I'm sure the audience would love, where you've obviously mentioned about gaming, that obviously you pulled that data and obviously are kind of using it to create artificial data, which kind of makes a lot of sense, and then obviously helping to do all different things out there. So thanks for this, Deep. I think I have learned a lot today about edge cases, about iMerit, and what you guys are doing. It's to another level that you've taken AI edge cases and the future looks kind of super bright in terms of the advancements too that you're looking at. And can't wait to see where and what iMerit will be doing in the next few months. There's always so much that iMerit has. Like when Radha was on the show, she shared so much, and now you, Sudeep, you are like a true engineer out there who's like doing all the geeky stuff, but making it more interesting for us when you're talking about it. Because I know for a fact it's not easy. What you're talking about, it kind of takes so much time, efforts, and that kind of creates value for your clients as well. So thank you very much for sharing everything. But I have a question from obviously audiences end that I wanted to ask, is more around, if someone wants to learn more about edge cases or want to learn more about uh, iMerit in general, do you guys have like a resource channel where they can go and learn more about it on the website, or anything available there for the audience?
Uh, So, if you want to understand more about what iMerit does and how iMerit can help you, just hit us on our webpage.
Yeah.
We've got solution experts, we've got sales folks waiting to talk to you. All the information is available on our website, so just visit our website. If you want to talk more about edge cases, then you could personally reach out to me on LinkedIn. You could also drop in emails to technologyhiring@imerit.net if you're
Nice.
interested in exploring roles here further. So various ways in which you can connect with us.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thanks for that information, and definitely for the folks who wish to also learn more about edge cases, and like Sudeep mentioned, if you're interested to work at iMerit, and there are many open roles, many opportunities to work with such amazing workforce. Also, quickly wanted to give a sneak peek into the library to our audience that you guys have, and I was going through the library months back, and I really liked it because you kind of get to learn a lot from the white papers, webinars, and all the on demand, the videos that you guys have put. So guys, if you're interested, definitely you can visit imerit.net slash content library, and you can learn more about imerit here as well. So there's a ton of resources out there which imerit has provided. But great session, Sudeep. Thank you very much once again for visiting the Ravit Show and talking a lot around edge cases, AI, and giving us those golden nuggets about how you practically work in the field. How do you kind of consider the client requirements? How do you guys align with that? And it's a lot of work that you guys are doing. So thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Ravit. Been really great to have this conversation with you. I hope there's been some useful content that your audience can appreciate. And thanks again for hosting me.
Thank you very much. And thanks, audience, for joining us today. Feel free to obviously reach out to Sudeep on LinkedIn if you have any questions. Also, there are open roles available at iMerit. Don't forget to check that out. And thank you once again.